My office at Coyote Creek Goods wasn't really an office. It was a chaotic, sun-drenched loft space I called the story room. One wall was a massive corkboard, layered 10 years deep with a collage of customer photos, handwritten thank you, notes and fabric swatches for products that had long since been discontinued. Another wall was lined with shelves groaning under the weight of every book on branding, folklore, and community building ever written. My desk was a sprawling, ancient oak table, its surface a testament to a decade of creative chaos. A half dozen different mugs of cold coffee, a tangle of charging cables, a DSLR camera, and at the center of it all, my trusty, well-worn MacBook Pro. It was from this chaotic, happy command center that I had for 10 years built an empire. I was the fifth employee of Coyote Creek Goods. I was hired by the founder, a gentle, bearded, and brilliantly eccentric man named Arthur. Back when the company was just him and a few artisans selling handcrafted leather bags out of a dusty garage in East Austin. My title was Social Media Manager, a term that in 2015 sounded both impossibly futuristic and slightly ridiculous. My job was to tell the company's story. And so I did. I started with a single, hopeful tweet sent out into the vast, empty void of the internet. We believe a beautiful thing made by hand can make the world a slightly better place. Hello, world. For the first few months, it felt like shouting into a canyon, but I was patient. I was authentic. I didn't just post pictures of our products, I posted pictures of the artisans who made them. I told their stories. I wrote long, heartfelt blog posts about the beauty of sustainable American-made craftsmanship. I didn't build a customer base. I nurtured a community, and it had worked. In 10 years, I had with my own two hands built the social media presence of Coyote Creek Goods from 0 followers to a multi-platform behemoth. We had 1.2 million devoted, deeply engaged followers on Instagram. We had a Facebook community 2 million strong, a place where people didn't just talk about our products, but shared pictures of their own creative projects, of their travels, of their lives. Our brand was not a corporation. It was a conversation, a feeling. And I, Brenda, the 60-year-old woman with a love for good stories and a knack for a witty caption, was the voice of that conversation. This morning, I was in my element. I was staging a photo shoot for a new line of hand-forged silver jewelry made by a wonderful 70-year-old artist from Marfa. I was arranging the delicate pieces on a beautiful, weathered piece of driftwood I had found on a weekend trip. The light from the large industrial windows was perfect. The scene was authentic. It was real. It was everything our brand was supposed to be. The first sign that the world was about to change came in the form of an email. An all-hands mandatory meeting summoned by our new CEO, Arthur. Our beloved founder had retired 6 months ago, selling his passion project to a large, faceless venture capital firm from Silicon Valley. And they, in turn, had installed one of their own to run his company. His name was Blake. The all-hands meeting was held in the company's main warehouse space. The entire staff, from the leather workers to the shipping department, was gathered. Blake, a man of 32 who was dressed in the unofficial uniform of his specious $400 black t-shirt, expensive designer jeans, and a pair of blindingly white sneakers that had clearly never touched a real sidewalk, strode onto the makeshift stage. He held a microphone in his hand as if he were about to give a TED Talk. Team, he began, his voice a loud, confident, and utterly soulless boom. Good morning. I am so incredibly psyched to be here, to be a part of the Coyote Creek journey. He began to pace the stage, his movements a well-rehearsed imitation of a charismatic leader. I have spent the last month on a deep dive of our analytics, our KPIs, our user engagement funnels. And I have to say, the work that Arthur and all of you have done to build this brand is incredible, truly. He paused, letting the faint, obligatory praise hang in the air. But he continued, his voice now shifting, taking on a harder, more aggressive edge. The era of the passion project is over. It is time for the era of scalability. is time to synergize our assets, to optimize our conversion rates, and to transform this charming artisanal brand into a global, multi-platform, direct-to-consumer lifestyle powerhouse. He spoke for 20 minutes, and in that time, he did not say a single genuine human thing. His speech was a torrent of the most infuriating, empty, and meaningless corporate jargon I had ever heard. He did not talk about our artisans, talked about leveraging our creator-based supply chain. He did not talk about our customers. He talked about monetizing our user base. It was a man who had looked at our beautiful, handcrafted, and deeply human company. And all he could see was a machine that was not producing money fast enough. After the meeting, he requested a one-on-one with me. We sat in my chaotic, story-filled office, him perched uncomfortably on the edge of a vintage leather armchair, looking around at the beautiful, sentimental clutter as if it were a pile of hazardous waste. "Brenda," he began, a slick, friendly smile on his face that did not reach his cold, dead eyes. "I've been looking at your data. Your engagement metrics are off the charts. Really impressive community building." "Thank you," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Our followers are very loyal." "Yes," he said, tapping on his iPad, "but your conversion rate per post is inefficient. The path from engagement to purchase is too long. We need to be more aggressive with our calls to action. We need to be funneling that loyalty directly to the point of sale." I said, trying to keep my tone respectful. "Our philosophy has always been that the community comes first. We don't sell to them, we talk to them, we share with them. The sales are a natural byproduct of that authentic relationship." He looked at me with a blank, uncomprehending stare. It was the look of a man trying to understand a foreign language. The concepts of authenticity and relationship were not a part of his data set, right? He said finally, his tone dismissive. "Well, we'll be bringing in a new, expanded marketing team to help you scale that authenticity. To build a more robust and results-driven digital strategy, I'm sure you'll appreciate the support." I knew a threat when I heard one. I was not being offered support. I was being put on notice. The new marketing team arrived the following week. They were a trio of young, ambitious, and deeply arrogant. Clones of Blake, all dressed in the same uniform of expensive, minimalist black. They set up a war room in the conference room next to my office, a space they filled with whiteboards, data charts, and the loud, obnoxious sound of their self-congratulatory brainstorming. They began, subtly at first, to encroach on my territory. They would take the beautiful, soulful photographs I had taken of our artisans and they would plaster them with ugly, aggressive text overlays. 50% off. Shop now. They started running focus groups to optimize our brand voice, a process that seemed to involve stripping it of all personality and humor. The first, true, and most painful act of their takeover happened a month later. I had written a long, heartfelt blog post for our website. It was a tribute to Arthur, our founder, on the 10th anniversary of the company. It was a story full of the beautiful, funny, and sometimes difficult memories of our early years. It was, I thought, a perfect expression of our brand's soul. I submitted it for approval, as I now had to. An hour later, I got an email back from one of the new marketing boys, kid named Chad, who looked like he had just graduated from college. Subject, blog post, Brenda. Thanks for this. Some nice stuff in here. We've done a slight rewrite to optimize it for SEO and to include a clearer call to action. See attached. Best, Chad. I opened the attachment. My beautiful, heartfelt, and deeply personal story had been gutted. It had been transformed into a sterile, soulless, and keyword-stuffed piece of marketing copy. The title was now 10 Reasons Coyote Creek Goods is the Best Artisanal Brand in Texas. And every paragraph ended with a bright, garish, and deeply insulting button that said, "Click here to shop our anniversary sale." I stood up from my desk and walked to the conference room. The three of them were in there, laughing at something on a laptop. "Chad," I said, my voice a low, dangerous rumble. We need to talk about your rewrite of my blog post." He looked up at me, a smug, dismissive smile on his face. "Oh, hey, Brenda. Yeah, isn't it great? The keyword density is perfect. It's going to crush our SEO goals. It's an abomination, Chad," I said, my voice shaking with a rage I could no longer contain. "It has all the soul of a corporate tax return. You have taken a piece of our company's history, and you have turned it into a cheap, ugly, and deeply insulting advertisement." "Whoa," he said, leaning back in his chair, his smile gone, replaced by a look of arrogant condescension. "I think you're being a little sentimental. My job isn't to write stories. My job is to drive sales. And this," he said, tapping his laptop, "is going to drive sales." He looked at me, a young, arrogant prince looking at a foolish, old woman who did not understand the new rules of his kingdom. "Blake has been very clear," he said, his voice now a quiet, dismissive threat. "We are moving in a new, more aggressive direction, and he wants everyone on the team to be a team player. You need to get on board, Brenda, or you are going to be left behind at the station." I stood there in the doorway of their sterile, soulless war room, and I looked at their young, confident, and deeply ignorant faces. And I knew with a profound and a deeply sorrowful certainty that my time here was over. The company I had loved, the community I had built, the story I had spent a decade telling, was being murdered. And its killers were these three smiling, data-driven boys in their expensive, black t-shirts. I walked back to my office, my beautiful, chaotic story room, and I sat at my desk. I looked at the first social media post I had ever written, the one I kept framed on my wall. "We believe a beautiful thing made by hand can make the world a slightly better place." And I knew that this place, this company, was no longer a place where beautiful things were made. It was just another factory. And I was just another old, inefficient, and sentimental machine, waiting to be cleared away to make room for a new and a more profitable model. The weeks following my confrontation with Chad, the boy king of the new marketing department, were a slow, agonizing education in the art of being made obsolete. My title, social media manager, remained the same, but my role was systematically, and with a quiet, brutal efficiency, dismantled. I was no longer the voice of Coyote Creek Goods. I was a ghost, a relic, a quiet 60-year-old woman forced to watch as the beautiful, vibrant house I had built was systematically stripped for parts by the soulless, jargon-spouting young men who had just foreclosed on it. Blake, our new CEO, with his MBA and his wardrobe of 1,000 identical black t-shirts, had given his new team, the growth hackers, as they called themselves, a clear mandate: monetize the community, authentic, story-driven, and deeply human conversation I had nurtured for a decade was deemed unscalable. It was replaced by a new optimized content strategy, a relentless, soul-crushing barrage of pure, unadulterated commerce. The change was immediate and grotesque. Our beautiful, warm, and slightly messy Instagram feed, once a loving collage of our artisans at work and the stunning landscapes of the Texas Hill Country, was transformed overnight into a sterile, repetitive grid of soulless product shots. Every post was the same: a leather bag or a piece of jewelry, floating in a sea of sterile white background, accompanied by a caption that was a masterpiece of corporate nonsense. Synergize your autumn aesthetic with the unparalleled craftsmanship of our heritage collection. Click the link in bio to optimize your style. Hashtag artisanal, hashtag luxury, hashtag Coyote Creek style. They had taken the soul of our company, run it through a corporate buzzword generator, and plastered the meaningless results all over the internet. The community, my community, the million-plus people I had spent 10 years talking to, responded with a swift and deeply satisfying revulsion. The comment section, which had once been a beautiful, flowing river of praise and friendly conversation, became a toxic swamp of confusion and anger. I was now relegated to the role of community moderator, a euphemism for a digital janitor. My job was to spend my days wading through the comments, deleting the most offensive ones, and trying to respond to the hundreds of angry, confused, and heartbroken messages from our most loyal followers. What is happening to you guys? This looks like an ad for a department store. This is so sad. You used to be my favorite brand. You've completely sold out. Where's Brenda? Did she leave? The voice of the brand is gone. Hashtag bring back the real Coyote Creek. I would read these comments. My heart aching with a mixture of profound sadness and a grim, vindicated rage. They saw it. They understood. But my hands were tied. I was ordered by Blake to reply with a series of pre-written, non-committal corporate statements. Thanks so much for your feedback. We're so excited to be moving in a new, dynamic direction, and we can't wait to share it with you. It was a lie, and it felt like a betrayal of every single person I was typing it to. The new team, of course, was completely baffled by the negative reaction. They were data-driven, and the data was telling them a story they couldn't comprehend. I don't get it, Chad said in a marketing meeting, pointing to a graph on the big screen that showed our engagement rates plummeting. The call to action is clear. The product is front and center. We're using all the right hashtags. Why aren't they converting? 'Cause they're not idiots, Chad, I said, my voice quiet, but it cut through the room like a knife. They're a community, and you are treating them like a walking column of dollar signs. You have taken a relationship and you have turned it into a transaction. People do not like to be treated like an algorithm. He and the other two boys just stared at me, their faces a mask of pure, uncomprehending condescension. I was the old sentimental woman talking about feelings. They were the young, brilliant men talking about data. In Blake's new, optimized world, I was speaking an ancient, dead language. The final nail in the coffin of the old Coyote Creek goods, and of my career, came in the form of a major online influencer. A woman named Clara, a prominent travel and lifestyle blogger with over 3 million followers. Clara had been a genuine, unpaid, and deeply passionate advocate for our brand for years. She had been a personal friend of mine. I had sent her one of our first bags, a lifetime ago. The new marketing team, in their data-driven wisdom, had decided to formalize this relationship. They had sent her a cold, impersonal email with a legalistic contract, offering her a small, insulting fee to become an official brand ambassador. A role that would require her to post 3 times a week using their pre-approved, soulless marketing copy. Clara's response was not a private email, was a public execution. She posted a long, eloquent, and absolutely devastating blog post, complete with screenshots of the insulting contract. The title of her post was, "A Eulogy for a Brand I Once Loved, How Coyote Creek Goods Lost Its Soul." The post went viral. It was a PR nightmare, a self-inflicted catastrophe of epic proportions. It was shared tens of thousands of times. The hashtag #RipCoyoteCreek began trending on Twitter. I spent the entire day of the firestorm doing what I had always done, trying to save the company from itself. I was on the phone for hours talking to reporters, to other bloggers trying to do damage control. I finally, after a dozen attempts, managed to get through to Clara herself. I apologized, not as an employee, but as a friend. Truth. I told her the company she had loved was gone, replaced by something cold and hollow and stupid. It was a sad, honest, and deeply painful conversation. I worked until late that Friday evening, long after the new marketing team, who seemed to be utterly paralyzed by a crisis that couldn't be solved with a hashtag, had all gone home. I finally, at around 8 o'clock, managed to get the situation under a fragile, temporary control. I had issued a public apology. I had spoken to the most important journalists. And I had, I hoped, staunched the bleeding. I drove home, my body a single throbbing ache of exhaustion and a deep, profound, and soul-crushing sadness. I walked into my quiet house, kicked off my shoes, and poured myself a very large glass of wine. And then my phone buzzed. It was a text message from a number I didn't have saved, but one I knew belonged to our new CEO, Blake. I opened it. The message was a single, monstrous, and beautifully self-incriminating paragraph. Brenda, it read, today's PR crisis was a complete disaster, and it has made it clear that your historical, sentimental approach to this brand is a significant liability in our new fast-paced market. We have decided to officially transition all social media and community management to the new marketing team, effective immediately. Your services are no longer required as of today. I read the words, my wine glass frozen halfway to my lips. Cold, creeping numbness spreading through me. After 10 years, after 1 million followers, after a decade of my life, of my creativity, of my soul poured into this company, he had fired me on a Friday night via a coward's text message. But it was the final, thoughtless, and utterly devastating sentence that would be his undoing. The one he had typed, I was sure, with a sense of corporate, box-sticking finality. Please wrap up all your accounts and have any company. Property returned by Monday. I read that sentence again. Wrap up all your accounts. The numbness that had enveloped me began to recede, and in its place a new feeling began to rise. It was a cold, pure, and exquisitely brilliant fury. I looked at the text message, at the cold, impersonal words of my own professional execution. And then I looked at the final stupid and beautifully ambiguous instruction. Wrap up all your accounts. He had no idea what he had just done. He had no idea of the power he had just, in his cowardly, dismissive haste, handed me. I was the only person on the planet who had the original administrative master-level passwords to every single digital asset Coyote Creek Goods possessed. I was the one who had set them all up a decade ago. I was the digital St. Peter, and I held the keys to his entire multi-million-dollar digital kingdom. He had fired me. He had declared me and my work and my community obsolete. And he had, in his infinite, arrogant, and MBA-educated wisdom, given me one last, final directive. A slow, dangerous, and deeply, deeply satisfying smile spread across my face. Okay, Blake. I whispered to my empty house. You got it. My grief was over. My sadness was gone. All that was left was the work. And I, Brenda, the loyal, sentimental, and now gloriously, beautifully vengeful old woman, always did the work. My services were no longer required. But I had one last, final, and magnificent account to wrap up. The text message from Blake glowed on my phone screen, a small black tombstone marking the death of my 10-year career. I sat in the quiet of my living room, the wine in my glass untouched, and I read his words again and again. Your services are no longer required as of today. The sheer, breathtaking cowardice of it was a thing of almost sublime ugliness. He had not had the courage to look me in the eye, to honor my decade of service with a simple, human conversation. It ended my life's work with the same casual, impersonal indifference with which one might cancel a magazine subscription. My husband, Frank, came into the room, his face a mask of worried concern. He had heard the single, sharp, and heartbroken laugh that had escaped my lips when I first read the text. "What is it, Bren?" he asked gently. I handed him the phone. He read the message, his expression shifting from confusion to a slow, simmering, and deeply protective rage. "That little son of a bitch," he whispered, his voice a low growl. "After everything you did for that company, he's firing you in a text message." "He is," I said, my voice now strangely calm. The initial hot wave of grief and humiliation had passed, leaving behind a cold, clear, and diamond-hard sense of purpose. I took the phone back and looked at the final, fateful sentence. "Please wrap up all your accounts and have any company property returned by Monday. He thinks he's just tying up a loose end," I said, a slow, dangerous smile beginning to form on my face. "He thinks he's just asking me to hand over the passwords. He's a child, playing with a vocabulary he doesn't understand. He has no idea what he has just authorized me to do." Frank looked at me, at the new, unfamiliar, and slightly terrifying light in my eyes. "What are you going to do?" "Going to do my job," I said, standing up, my movements now filled with a new, strange energy. "I am going to follow the written directive of my CEO to the absolute letter. He wants me to wrap up my accounts. Fine, let's wrap them up." My revenge would not be a messy, emotional outburst. It would be a quiet, meticulous, and deeply satisfying act of professional compliance. It would be a masterclass in the art of taking a man at his word. I did not begin my work on my sleek, new personal laptop. I went to my study and retrieved an old friend from the closet. Company-issued MacBook Pro, the one Arthur, the founder, had given me on my first day 10 years ago. Its silver case was scratched and dented, a roadmap of a decade of late nights and creative breakthroughs. And on it, and only on it, were the original master-level access credentials to every single digital asset of the Coyote Creek Goods empire. Beside it, in my desk drawer, was a small, worn, leather-bound notebook. It was my digital black book. In it, written in my own careful looping script, were the keys to the kingdom. The original unchangeable master passwords, the recovery codes, the secret answers to the security questions for every platform, every server, every single piece of the digital world I had built from scratch. The new, slick IT department Blake had hired had built their own systems on top of mine. But I was the one who had laid the foundation. I was the one who still held the deed to the land. My first act was not one of destruction, but of preservation of a sort. I plugged in an external hard drive, and I made a single, personal, and deeply encrypted copy of my own work, the photos of the artisans I had befriended, the stories I had written, the first hopeful blog posts from a decade ago. It was the story of the company's soul. A soul that was, as of tonight, officially dead. I would be its sole and final archivist. Then the real work began. The demolition. I started with the source, the visual identity of the brand. I logged into the company's master Dropbox account, a cloud-based archive that contained a decade's worth of professional photography, video content, and graphic design assets. This was a digital museum of my life's work. I opened the folder. For the first year, 2015. The photos were clumsy, amateurish, taken by me with a cheap camera in Arthur's dusty garage. There he was, a younger, happier version of himself, laughing as he struggled with a piece of leather. There was the first bag we ever sold. I looked at the photos and I felt a profound, aching sadness for the beautiful, authentic thing we had built, the thing that Blake and his soulless corporate vandals were now so intent on destroying. I right-clicked on the folder. A small menu appeared. At the bottom was the option I was looking for. Delete permanently. Not just delete, not a gentle move to the trash bin from which it could be easily recovered. Delete permanently. A digital annihilation. A final, irreversible erasure. My hand trembled for a moment. This was my work, my art, my history. And I was about to turn it into a cloud of ones and zeros. He fired you with a text message. A thought was a cold, clarifying splash of water. I clicked the button. A small, innocent-looking pop-up appeared. "Are you sure you want to permanently delete this folder? This action cannot be undone." "Yes," I whispered to the empty room. "I am." I clicked OK. The folder vanished. 2015 was gone. I moved. On 2016, the year we had our first real photo shoot in the Texas Hill Country, I saw the pictures of the bluebonnets of the beautiful, sun-drenched landscapes. I remembered the joy, the excitement, the feeling that we were creating something real. Delete permanently. It was gone. 2017, 2018, 2019. On and on it went. I moved through the archive of my own career, year by year, memory by memory, and I systematically, methodically, and with a growing cold and deeply satisfying sense of resolve, I erased it all. By the time I was finished, 3 hours later, the vast, beautiful, and priceless digital archive of Coyote Creek goods was a pristine and utterly, completely empty. Void. Next, the community itself. The newsletter. I logged into the MailChimp account. I looked at the number. 1.8 million subscribers. 1.8 million people who had at some point given us their email address, their trust, their permission to speak to them directly. It was the company's most valuable direct marketing asset, a tool that had taken a decade of careful, patient work to build. I sat for a long time, and I composed one final and deeply cryptic email. Subject: goodbye. The body of the email was just 3 sentences. To our beautiful, loyal, and wonderful community. Thank you for 10 years of stories, of conversations, of joy. The creek has run its course. Brenda. I scheduled it to be sent at 8:59 a.m. on Monday morning. 1 minute before the office officially opened, a final ghostly farewell from a brand that would, by then, no longer exist. Then I navigated to the account settings. I found the button I was looking for, delete account. Clicked it. Another pop-up appeared, this one more serious, the digital equivalent of a skull and crossbones. This is an irreversible action. You will be permanently deleting all subscriber lists, all campaign data, and all history associated with this account. Are you absolutely, positively sure? I typed the required confirmation phrase into the text box. Permanently delete. I clicked the final red button. The account and the 1.8 million people who had been a part of it vanished into the digital ether. It was time for the main event. The social media platforms, the public face of the empire. I started with the smaller ones first, the appetizers before the main course. Pinterest, with its 500,000 followers, gone. Twitter, a feed I had personally and witly curated for a decade, gone. Then Facebook, 2 million followers, a vibrant community page. I navigated to the Business Manager, a tool I knew with an intimacy that the new clueless marketing boys could only dream of. My first act was to go to the list of administrators. I saw their names there, Chad and the others. Their access granted by Blake, and next to their names was the small, beautiful button, Remove. I clicked it for each of them, one by one, their digital keys to my kingdom revoked. And then I initiated the page deletion. It was a complex, multi-step process designed to be difficult, but I was patient. I was methodical. I followed the steps. The page and the community it had hosted was scheduled for permanent deletion. And finally, Instagram, the jewel in the crown, 1.2 million followers. A beautiful, carefully curated grid of images that told the visual story of a decade of our brand. It was my masterpiece. It was time to burn it. I opened the app on my phone. I went to the settings. I scrolled down to the bottom. Permanently delete your account. I clicked the link. Took me to a final somber-looking page. A digital graveyard. We're sad to see you go. The page read, please tell us why you are leaving. I looked at the drop-down menu of options. Too busy, too distracting, privacy concerns. Created a second account. I scrolled down until I found the one I was looking for. Something else. I took a deep, final, and deeply satisfied breath. I had been given a written, direct, and legally binding instruction from my CEO, and I was, at last, ready to comply with it. I clicked the final, fateful button, permanently delete my account. It was done. I spent the rest of the weekend in a state of strange, quiet, and deeply peaceful limbo. On Sunday night, I took my company laptop, the instrument of my beautiful, terrible revenge. I did not just delete the files. I initiated a full, deep level, secure hard drive wipe, the kind that overwrites the data 7 times, a process that takes hours and leaves nothing behind but a clean, empty, and utterly unrecoverable slate. On Monday morning, I placed the wiped, now useless laptop in its original box, along with my company ID and the key to my office. I drove to our trendy, beautiful, and now digitally soulless headquarters in East Austin. I did not go inside. I simply left the box with the receptionist at the front desk. "Please make sure Blake gets this," I said with a small, polite smile. My work was done, my services were no longer required. And I had, as per his final, written instruction, well and truly wrapped it all up. Monday morning at the Austin headquarters of Coyote Creek Goods began with the smug, self-satisfied hum of a new regime taking power. I was not there, of course, but I could picture the scene with a clarity that was almost cinematic. I had spent a decade in that building. I knew its rhythms, its characters, its very soul. And I knew, with an absolute certainty, that its soul was about to be declared officially dead. I imagined Blake, our Boy King CEO, striding into the open plan office at 9 a.m. sharp, a venti-sized cup of some ridiculously expensive coffee in his hand. He would be wearing his Monday uniform, a fresh, perfectly crisp black t-shirt, dark designer jeans, and a pair of white sneakers so pristine they looked like they had been teleported from the store directly onto his feet. He would be radiating an aura of disruptive, data-driven energy. He would convene his war council, the trio of young, ambitious marketing growth hackers I had privately nicknamed the Stepford Wives, in their glass-walled conference room. Chad, the smuggest of the three, would be at the main keyboard, ready to perform the digital equivalent of planting a flag on conquered territory. Their mission for the morning was simple: to complete the hostile takeover of the company's social media accounts, to change all the passwords, and to officially and for all time lock out the ghost of the sentimental old woman who had been holding the brand back. They would be laughing. I was sure of it. They would be talking about their new, aggressive monetization funnel and the legacy user base they were about to re-engage with a barrage of discount codes and pop-up ads. They were young, they were brilliant, and they were completely, utterly, and beautifully clueless. They had no idea they were the proud new owners of a digital ghost town. They were about to try and log into a kingdom whose gates I had not just locked, but had methodically, brick by brick, dismantled and scattered into the winds of the internet. I imagined Chad cracking his knuckles with a theatrical flourish. "K-Team," he would say, his voice full of the unearned confidence of a man who has never known failure. Phase 1 of the brand refresh begins. Now, let's start with the big one. Instagram. Time to change the locks on Brenda's little playhouse. He would navigate to the Instagram login page. He would type in the username, @CoyoteCreekGoods. He would type in the password I had been forced to share with him in a transition document a week ago. And he would hit enter. The screen would display a small, red, and deeply confusing message. Username not found. His first reaction would not be panic. It would be annoyance. He would assume I, in a final petty act of defiance, had changed the username. "Son of a bitch," he'd mutter. The old bat changed the handle. Cute, real professional. He would then spend the next 10 minutes searching for the account. He would try variations at Coyote Creek _official. At the real Coyote Creek. Nothing. He would try searching for one of our most popular hashtags, #Coyote Creek style. The hashtag would still exist, but it would be a ghost town, a collection of old user-generated posts, all linking back to a profile that no longer existed. Blake, growing impatient, would loom over his shoulder. "What's the problem, Chad?" "I don't know," Chad would say, his voice now laced with the first faint tremor of anxiety. "The account, it's just gone. Maybe she blocked us." The other two marketing boys would pull out their phones, their thumbs flying across their screens. "I'm not seeing it either," one would say. "I just get a sorry. This page is an available error. Try the link from the main website." Blake would command his own voice, now taking on a hard sharp edge. They would click the small, elegant Instagram icon at the bottom of the company's homepage, and it would take them to the same blank and increasingly terrifying error page. The mood in the war room would now be shifting. The smug, self-satisfied confidence would be evaporating, replaced by a cold, creeping, and deeply unfamiliar dread. Fine. Blake would snap. Forget Instagram. Let's try Facebook. Seize that account now. The same surreal and deeply frustrating process would repeat. They would try to log in to the Coyote Creek Goods Facebook page, a page with over 2 million followers, a page where I had personally, over the course of a decade, answered tens of thousands of customer comments. They would be met with the same digital brick wall. The page did not exist. What the hell is going on? Blake would roar, his voice echoing in the suddenly silent office. Is this a server issue? Did Facebook go down? No, another of the marketing boys would whisper, his face pale as he scrolled through his own personal feed. It's working fine. Page is just gone. Check Twitter, Blake would command, his voice now a low, dangerous growl. Check TikTok. Check Pinterest. Check every single goddamn platform we are on. For the next 5 minutes, the only sound in the room would be the frantic, panicked clicking of keyboards, each click a new nail in the coffin of their careers. And the reports would come back one after another, a chorus of digital death. Twitter account suspended. Pinterest. TikTok. User not found. They were standing in the middle of a digital Pompeii, a once vibrant civilization that had been dived in the space of a single silent weekend, completely and utterly erased from the face of the earth. The full apocalyptic scope of the disaster would require a higher authority. Blake, now in a state of pure apoplectic rage, would summon the head of the IT department. A quiet, perpetually stressed man named David. David would enter the war room, see the panicked, ashen faces of the marketing team, and his own face would pale. He would sit at the main computer. He would run his diagnostics. He would check the company's social media management dashboard, a third-party software that aggregates all the accounts, and he would find nothing. The connections were all severed. The accounts were all dark. This is not a hack, David would say, his voice a quiet, grim pronouncement after 15 minutes of frantic and fruitless work. Hack looks different. A hack is noisy. They deface the page. They post spam. This is quiet. This is an administrative action. What the hell does that mean, David? Blake would snarl. It means, David would say, turning to face him, his expression a mixture of awe and terror, that the accounts weren't hacked or suspended by the platforms. They were deleted by a user with the highest level of administrative access. The master administrator. Brenda, Chad would whisper, the name a curse. But they can be recovered, right? Blake would demand, you can call Facebook, you can call Instagram. You can tell them it was an unauthorized deletion. You can get them back. David would just shake his head slowly. Not how it works, Blake, he'd say. These platforms have a process for permanent deletion. For an account of this size, it requires multiple authenticated steps. It is designed to be irreversible. The user has to confirm multiple times that they understand they are permanently deleting all content, all followers, all history. He would take a deep, shuddering breath. According to their terms of service, once an account is permanently deleted, it's gone. It's like it never existed. The data is purged from their servers. There is nothing to recover. We would have to start again, from zero, 0 followers, 0 posts, 0 history. A decade of community building, of brand equity, of a multi-million-dollar digital empire gone. Wiped from the historical record, the silence that would follow David's pronouncement would be the silence of pure, unadulterated, and career-ending horror. And then the final, most terrible discovery would be made. One of the other marketing boys, the one tasked with email marketing, would let out a small, strangled squeak. "Oh God," he'd whisper. "What is it now?" Blake would roar. The MailChimp account, the boy would stammer. The email list? It's gone. The entire subscriber list has been purged. He would then look at his own email on his phone. And it looks like the master account sent out one final unauthorized email this morning at 8:59 a.m. He would show his phone to Blake. The email, with its simple, cryptic, and devastatingly poetic message, would be the final ghostly testament of the woman who had just burned their entire world to the ground. The creek has run its course. Goodbye. The final piece of the puzzle would be the cloud-based content archive. The Dropbox account that was supposed to hold a decade's worth of priceless photography and video. It, too, was a ghost town, an empty digital void. They had not just been locked out of the house. The house had been systematically, methodically, and with a terrifying professional precision dismantled, and its every brick, every nail, every single solitary splinter had been vaporized. It would be at this point, in the smoldering digital ruins of his new, bright future, that Blake would finally, and at long last, think to call me. I was at home, of course. I had just finished my morning walk. I was sitting on my porch, a cup of coffee in hand, my phone resting peacefully beside me. I was expecting his call. And when it came, I answered on the first ring, my voice a perfect, cheerful, and utterly infuriating model of helpful customer service politeness. "Hello." Sound on the other end of the line was not a human voice. It was a sound of pure, primal, and apoplectic rage, a barely coherent scream of fury. "Brenda, what the fuck did you do?" "Blake," I said, my voice full of a warm, concerned surprise. "Is that you? Is everything all right? You sound upset." "Upset?" he shrieked, his voice cracking with the strain. "I am going to sue you into oblivion. I am going to destroy you. You have sabotaged this entire company. The accounts. They're all gone. The accounts," I said, feigning a polite confusion. "Oh, you mean the social media accounts?" "Yes, I wrapped them up, just like you asked." There was a stunned, sputtering silence on the other end of the line. "What? What are you talking about?" "He finally managed to say your text message, Blake." I said, my voice as calm and as clear as a legal brief. "Your final written directive to me as an employee of Coyote Creek Goods. You told me, and I am, quoting, that my services were no longer required and that I should, quote, wrap up all your accounts. So I did." "Wrap up doesn't mean delete," he screamed. "Doesn't it?" I asked, my tone one of pure academic curiosity. "I'm afraid I must have misunderstood. I am a 60-year-old woman, Blake. All this new, hip corporate jargon, it can be so confusing. When you are the sole master administrator of an account and your services are terminated, the final, official, and most thorough step of wrapping up that account is, of course, its permanent closure and deletion. I was just trying to be thorough. I was just following my boss's orders. I thought you wanted a clean slate for your new team. I thought I was helping." I let the beautiful, malicious, and utterly unassailable logic of my position settle in. He had no legal recourse. He had given me a vague, poorly worded, and cowardly written instruction. And I had, with a beautiful and devastating literalness, complied with it. He was silent. I could hear the sound of his ragged, frantic breathing on the other end of the line. I could hear the sound of his multi-million-dollar disaster, of his own hubris, of his own stupidity crashing down upon him. He had been outmaneuvered. He had been outsmarted. He had been completely and totally destroyed by a woman he had dismissed as a sentimental, obsolete, and harmless old relic. "I have to go now." "Blake," I said, my voice still cheerful, "I have a plane to catch. My retirement is off to a wonderful start." I hung up the phone. I did not block his number. I did not need to. I knew with a deep and abiding certainty that I would never be hearing from him again. Did not stick around to watch the city burn. The moment I dropped off my wiped company laptop at the front desk of the Coyote Creek Goods headquarters. My work in Austin, Texas was complete. My husband, Frank, was waiting for me in our packed car. We did not go back to our house. We drove east, towards the sunrise, with no particular destination in mind. For the first time in 10 years, I did not have a content calendar, a performance metric, or a community to manage. I had only the open road, a full tank of gas, and a profound, exhilarating, and slightly terrifying sense of absolute freedom. I made myself a promise. For 1 month, I would be a ghost. No social media. No news. No emails. I turned my phone off and placed it in the glove compartment. I was a digital creator who was embarking on a radical analog detox. My revenge had been a digital apocalypse. My recovery would be a quiet, disconnected pilgrimage. The story of what happened next, the story of the great digital implosion of Coyote Creek Goods, came to me later in bits and pieces. Like dispatches from a distant and chaotic war zone. The first phase, as I had predicted, was pure, unadulterated panic. The new marketing team, my 3 beautiful, arrogant, and utterly useless replacements, spent all of Monday morning in a state of frantic, caffeine-fueled terror, trying to log into a digital kingdom that no longer existed. Their slow, dawning horror, as described to me weeks later by a former colleague, was a masterpiece of corporate schadenfreude. They were like 3 clueless astronauts who had arrived on a vibrant, populated planet only to find that someone had, overnight, turned off the atmosphere and stolen the sky. Blake, their glorious leader, had, of course, gone nuclear. His initial screaming and deeply satisfying phone call to me had been met with my polite, unassailable logic, and then with the profound and infuriating silence of my disconnected phone. He had, I was told, spent the rest of the day in a series of apoplectic, increasingly desperate meetings with the IT department, with the company's lawyers, and finally with the venture capital board that had so foolishly appointed him. He had tried to frame my actions as a criminal act of sabotage. But he was trapped by the beautiful, simple, and legally ironclad prison of his own words. His own carelessly worded text message was the only piece of evidence that mattered. He had not fired me for cause. He had terminated my services, and he had given me a direct, if vague, written instruction: wrap up all your accounts. I had not been a disgruntled employee. I had been a diligent one, performing my final duty with a level of thoroughness he had not anticipated. His lawyers, after reviewing the text, had apparently informed him that while my actions were catastrophically damaging, they were not, in the strictest sense of the law, illegal. They were a matter of extreme malicious compliance. The story, a story this strange and this perfect, could not be contained. It broke on Tuesday, first on a few small, niche marketing blogs. The headlines were cautious, but intrigued. Coyote Creek Goods goes dark. A glitch or a guerrilla marketing stunt. The real explosion came from a place I never would have expected. On Wednesday, a junior graphic designer at the company, a young woman who had been a silent, terrified witness to the marketing team's meltdown, anonymously posted a sanitized version of the story to the Am I the Asshole? subreddit.her post, which I finally read a month later from a dusty internet cafe in a small town in New Mexico. Was a work of art titled Aita, for feeling like my new CEO is the asshole for what happened to our 60-year-old social media manager. She laid out the story with a neutral, just-a-facts tone. She described Brenda, a beloved long-term employee who had built their brand's community from scratch. She described the new jargon-spouting CEO, Blake, and his aggressive, data-driven team. She described the soulless corporate changes to the brand's voice and the community's negative reaction. And then she described the final brutal act, the firing of Brenda via a cold impersonal text message, and the vague instruction to wrap up her accounts. The post went viral in a way that defied all corporate projections. It was a perfect parable for the modern workplace, a story that tapped into a deep, collective well of quiet, simmering resentment felt by millions of workers who felt undervalued, disrespected, and disposable. The comments section was a tidal wave of righteous fury, all directed at Blake. NTA, not the asshole. Your CEO is a soulless corporate ghoul, firing a 10-year veteran via text. He deserved everything he got. Brenda is my hero. This is the new standard for all exit interviews. Wrap up all your accounts is now my favorite corporate euphemism for burn eye to the fucking ground. This isn't malicious compliance. This is legendary compliance. The story, now supercharged by the democratic, uncontrollable engine of social media, was picked up by the mainstream press. Wired ran a long, detailed investigative piece titled, "The Day the Creek Ran Dry: How a Single Text Message Erased a Multi-million-dollar Brand." The New York Times business section wrote a think piece on the story, framing me as a new kind of digital folk hero. A John Henry for the Great Resignation era. A single, human-powered force who had stood up against the relentless, soulless machine of corporate optimization. The fallout for Blake and for Coyote Creek Goods was, as I had intended, catastrophic. The venture capital board, horrified by the public relations nightmare and the complete annihilation of their most valuable assets, a brand's community and digital presence, fired Blake immediately. His career in the tech and business world was not just over, it was a punchline. The company itself, now a rudderless ship with a massive self-inflicted hole in its hull, was forced to issue a series of humiliating public apologies. They tried to rebuild. They started a new Instagram account. It gained a few thousand followers, most of whom, I was told, were just there to post mocking comments and memes about their former glory. The brand was no longer a beloved, authentic voice. It was a joke, a cautionary tale, a digital ghost. I, for my part, knew nothing of this as it was happening. I was gloriously, blissfully offline. Frank and I drove. We drove through the vast, empty beauty of West Texas. We spent a week in the quiet, dusty, and deeply spiritual landscape of New Mexico, exploring the art galleries of Santa Fe and the ancient cliff dwellings of Bandelier. We were not on a vacation. We were on an exodus, a journey away from the noise towards a new, quieter, and more authentic way of being. After a month of this peaceful, nomadic existence, we crossed the border into Mexico. We found a small, sleepy, and almost ridiculously picturesque fishing village on the Pacific coast, a place with no high-rise hotels, no tourist traps, and a single, unreliable internet cafe. We rented a small, simple, and beautiful casita on a cliff overlooking the ocean, and there, for the first time in a decade, I truly rested. My days were a simple, beautiful rhythm. I would wake with the sun, walk on the empty beach, buy fresh fish from the fishermen for our dinner. I would spend the afternoons in a hammock on our porch, reading the thick, wonderful, and completely non-digital paper novels I had never had time for. I learned to cook the local food, to make tortillas by hand, to appreciate the simple, profound genius of a perfect fresh-caught fish, grilled over an open fire with just a squeeze of lime. It was a life that was completely and beautifully unscalable. It was a life that could not be optimized. It was just life. It was on a warm, lazy afternoon, about 2 months into our new, quiet existence, that I finally decided to reconnect. I walked to the dusty internet cafe, paid the owner a few pesos, and I logged into my personal email for the first time since I had left Austin. My inbox was a predictable avalanche of messages. But there, amidst the chaos, was a single, simple email from my old friend and the company's founder, Arthur. The subject line was just one word: bravo. The body of the email was a single link. It was to the New York Times article. I sat there, in the dusty, quiet, and deeply analog internet cafe. And I read the story of my own legend. I read about the text message, about the deleted accounts, about my new status as a folk hero of the modern worker. I read about Blake's firing, about the collapse of the company's stock price. I read the story of the complete and total vindication of my actions. And as I read, a slow, quiet, and deeply, deeply satisfied smile spread across my face. I did not feel like a hero. I did not feel like a legend. I just felt free. I closed the laptop. My work was done. My story, it seemed, had been told. I paid the owner for my coffee, and I walked out of the dark, dusty cafe into the brilliant, warm, and life-affirming Mexican sun. Frank was waiting for me on the beach, a small celebratory bonfire already started. He handed me a margarita, its rim crusted with salt, the glass cold and sweating in my hand. "So," he asked, a knowing smile on his face, "how's the world?" "It's fine," I said, looking out at the endless, beautiful, and completely unmonetized expanse of the Pacific Ocean. "It seems to be managing just fine without me." I took a sip of my drink. The tequila was sharp, the lime was fresh. The salt was real. It was the taste of my victory. It was the taste of my freedom. And it was the most authentic and the most satisfying thing I had ever known. A year in the small, sun-drenched fishing village of Yellowpaw, Mexico, is a lifetime. It is 1,000 sunrises over the Bay of Banderas, each one a soft watercolor painting of pink and gold. It is 100 thunderstorms rolling in from the Pacific with a theatrical, percussive fury and then vanishing just as quickly, leaving the air clean and smelling of wet earth and tropical flowers. It is a life measured not in fiscal quarters and engagement metrics, but in the slow, patient, and deeply satisfying rhythm of the tides. In the years since I had executed my digital scorched earth policy on Coyote Creek goods, I had, for the first time in my adult life, learned to be still. The phantom limb of my career, the constant buzzing need to check my phone, to post, to reply, to manage, had slowly and blessedly faded away. My husband, Frank, and I had settled into a beautiful, simple life in our small casita on the hill. I had learned to make mole from a woman who had learned it from her grandmother. I had learned the names of 100 different tropical birds. I had filled a dozen sketchbooks with drawings of the jungle, the ocean, the beautiful weathered faces of the fishermen in the village. I was not a social media manager anymore. I was not a folk hero. I was just Brenda. I had never been happier to the world I had left behind. The world of Blake and his venture capital overlords had tried to find me, of course. In the first few months after the story of my legendary compliance had gone viral, I had received a flurry of emails, forwarded to me by a trusted friend. They were from other brands, from marketing agencies, from publishers. They offered me jobs, consulting gigs, book deals. They all wanted to capitalize on my story, to bottle my particular brand of quiet, authentic rebellion and sell it. I had politely and firmly declined every single one. My authenticity, I had decided, was no longer for sale. I had kept only one single, tenuous connection to my old life. A quiet, occasional email correspondence with Arthur, the gentle eccentric, founder of Coyote Creek Goods. He had been horrified by what Blake had done to his company and to me. And he had been, he admitted deeply and privately, proud of the brilliant, devastating way I had handled it. Our emails were not about business. They were just the quiet, comfortable check-ins of two old dear friends. The package arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by the town's only mailman who had to navigate his donkey up the steep cobblestone path to our casita. It was a large, heavy, and official-looking parcel forwarded from a post office box I kept in Texas. The return address was a law firm in Austin, and in the top left corner, in a familiar, elegant script, were the words, "From." The desk of Arthur P. Albright. My heart gave a small, curious thud. I opened the box. Inside, nestled in a sea of packing peanuts, was a thick, leather-bound document and a simple, handwritten letter. I read the letter first. My dearest Brenda, it began. I hope this letter finds you well, and that the sun in Mexico is as warm and as healing as you deserve. I have been following your quiet, new life through our mutual friends, and I am filled with a deep and abiding joy to know that you have found peace. I am writing to you today. However, not just as your old friend, but as a reluctant and, once again, a hopeful businessman. As you know, the venture capital firm that purchased Coyote Creek Goods ran it into the ground with a spectacular display of greed and incompetence. After your final act of administrative tidying, the brand was rendered worthless. Its stock plummeted to zero. Last month, in a quiet, unpublicized bankruptcy auction, the firm's remaining physical assets were sold off for pennies on the dollar. I am happy to report, the sole bidder. I stopped reading, my breath catching in my throat. I looked at the thick, leather-bound document in the box. It was a deed. The deed to the workshop in East Austin, the deed to the warehouse, and the official legal ownership of the now tarnished but not forgotten trademark, Coyote Creek Goods. I turned back to the letter, my hands now trembling slightly. I am, it seems, once again the owner of a small, artisanal goods company with no inventory, no staff, and no digital presence whatsoever. It is a ghost of a company. A clean slate. I am an old man, Brenda. I am too tired to build another empire. But my heart breaks to think of our beautiful creation, our little company that was built on a foundation of stories and craftsmanship. Being nothing more than a cautionary tale in a business school textbook, it deserved better. You deserved better. And so I am writing to you with a proposal. The document in this box is not just a deed, 'tis a partnership agreement. I have founded a new company, and I have, in the eyes of the state of Texas, made you my full 50% partner. This is not a job offer, Brenda. 'Tis a key. I do not want you to come back to the stress, to the 80-hour weeks. But I am asking you to consider being my partner in a new, quieter, and more honest venture. Let us rebuild it together, not as a global powerhouse, but as what it was always meant to be, a small, beautiful, and authentic company built on the simple principle of making good things by hand. Let us resurrect the soul of Coyote Creek Goods. Think about it. We could call it Coyote Creek Reclaimed. Yours always, Arthur. I sat there on my sun-drenched porch in Mexico, the sound of the gentle waves crashing on the shore below, and I held the future in my hands. A future I thought I had left behind forever. A future I had, with my own two hands, so spectacularly destroyed. And now it was being offered back to me, not as a job, but as a partnership, a home. I spent the next week in a state of profound and deeply conflicted soul-searching. I talked about it for hours with Frank. A part of me, the part that had so deeply embraced this new, peaceful, analog life, was terrified of returning to the world of deadlines and responsibilities. But another deeper part of me, the part that still dreamed of storytelling, of community, of the beautiful collaborative magic of creating something real, was stirring from its long, quiet slumber. The decision, when it came, was not a choice between my new life and my old one. It was a decision to merge them. I sat down and I wrote a letter back to Arthur. I accepted his partnership, but, as with any good contract, I proposed my own terms. Dear Arthur, I wrote, I will be your partner, but not your full-time in-house social media manager. I will be your creative director. I will work remotely from my new, quiet home in Mexico for half of the year. I will fly to Austin for important meetings, but my work will be one of vision, not of daily grind. We will hire a new, small, and carefully chosen team of young, talented creators, and my job will be to mentor them, to teach them our old, slow, and authentic way of doing things. We will build a company that is not just financially sustainable, but humanly sustainable. A company with a 40-hour work week with generous vacation time, and with a core belief that the well-being of its people is more important than its quarterly growth projections. I sent the letter. Arthur's reply, which came a day later, was a single joyful sentence. I wouldn't have it any other way. Welcome home, partner. And so my story ends as it began, with a new blank page. I am sitting on my porch in my small casita in Yalapa, the window open to the sound of the ocean, my laptop open in front of me. On the screen is a new, clean, and completely empty Instagram page. The handle is at Coyote Creek Reclaimed.I thing for a long time about what the first post should be. It cannot be a product shot. It cannot be an advertisement. It has to be a statement of intent. A promise. I choose a photograph, not a slick, professional one. A simple, candid snapshot taken by Frank just a few days ago. It is a picture of my own two hands, no longer the hands of a digital manager, but the hands of a gardener, a cook, a woman who lives in the real world. They are tan, they are slightly wrinkled, and they are covered in the honest, good dirt of my own small garden, and underneath I type the caption. The first words of our new, reclaimed story. We believe a beautiful thing, made by hand, can make the world a slightly better place. I pause, and then I add the final, triumphant and deeply satisfying words. Hello again, world. I hit share. My revenge on Blake, on the soulless corporate world he represented, was not, in the end, an act of destruction, was an act of purification. This was a controlled burn that had cleared the ground for a new, healthier, and more authentic forest. To grow, I had not just gotten my old job back. I had, with the help of a good and loyal friend, reclaimed its soul. And our story was just beginning.